know the why human trafficking work is needed, to fight for the freedom of modern-day slaves. But love, passion, commitment isn't all you need to be an effective and successful anti-trafficking advocate. Learn the how. I'm Dr. Celia Williamson, Director of the Human Trafficking and Social Justice Institute at the University of Toledo. Welcome to the Emancipation Nation podcast, where I'll provide you with the latest and best methods, policy, and practice discussed by experienced experts in the field so that you can cut through the noise, save time, and be about the work of saving lives. Welcome to episode 171 of the Emancipation Nation. I'm Dr. Celia Williamson, and today we're talking about empathy. Have you ever thought of what a concerned parent of a trafficked child must go through? Have you ever put your feet in the shoes of a mom struggling with a child with mental illness? Well, you're about to go inside and learn the emotional struggle and fight that takes place in trying to work with systems designed to respond and support you. Do these systems partner with parents, or do they present barriers? This is a difficult to listen to step-by-step account of the struggle to regain and keep safe a bright, talented, and loving daughter. This is Carolyn Kinkoff's struggle to save her daughter. This is a presentation that was presented at our 2022 Human Trafficking and Social Justice Conference. I'm going to play it unedited.
Well-behaved women seldom make history. Laurel Thatcher Ulrich. What do you think when you hear this quote? Some may think it is a cry for activism or permission to misbehave, but the scholarly context is quite different. In the Harvard Gazette article dated September 20, 2007, the title of Miss Ulrich's book is explained by pointing out that the histories of ordinary women have not been widely known because historians have not looked carefully at their lives. To me, this quote describes my daughter's life and the story of many human trafficking victims whose lives may appear ordinary, but on the contrary, are quite extraordinary. Human trafficking victimization is often hidden in plain sight, as you'll see through this narrative. Although the title of my presentation is A Survivor Parent's Journey, this is Courtney's story through my experiences with her. Several years ago, one of her former mental health caregivers advised that I write a timeline. Since then, I've written timelines, asked Courtney questions, collected certified medical records, and shared information with numerous providers and law enforcement agencies. So, before I tell you the beginning of Courtney's story, I'd like to reflect on some notes regarding how I felt in 2018 as the legal guardian of my 26-year-old daughter who had been diagnosed with a severe mental illness. I wished I could childproof the world. It seemed like I was watching my adult child slowly decline without the ability to care for herself. Little did I know those words I wrote 4 years ago would foreshadow Courtney's demise and the end of our journey together that tragically ended in February earlier this year. Now, let's go back and start from the beginning. Please note that although the medical, public, and my private records contain names of individuals and facilities, they are intentionally not being provided during this presentation in honor of Courtney's memory and to retain her privacy, dignity, and respect. Courtney had a normal childhood. Her family was proud of her every accomplishment. She was very intelligent, with standardized test scores always in the 90th percentile and as high as the 99th percentile. Courtney began writing her name at the age of 2, enjoyed looking at the dictionary before she could read, and always loved creating art from the time she could hold a crayon and use paints. She loved each member of her family, but had a special affinity for her grandfather. Courtney's grandfather suddenly passed away when she was 8 years old. She never recovered from his loss, but held on to the patterns her grandfather set in motion in her love for playing games, using codes, and symbols on papers and later in tattoos, plus creating recipes well into adulthood. Just ask her dad about the ranch dressing, salsa, and dry minced onion snack she once made for him. Courtney suffered from many years of bullying in grade school because of a condition called esotropia, a form of strabismus, which had the appearance of a lazy eye. Her father and I entrusted ophthalmologists to do everything medically possible, but despite the maximum amount of correction that could be done, Courtney still looked and felt different in her eyes and from the perception of her bullies. We tried friendship groups through the school without success. Courtney always had our support while we encouraged her to be self-confident and socialize with her peers, but she often preferred being alone. She had a few very close friends throughout her life. Her father and I encouraged socialization in hopes of Courtney forming healthy relationships. In 7th grade, Courtney's principal asked if her father and I ever considered that she might have ADHD. Her pediatrician recanted with a firm no. When we asked him the same question, because Courtney's grades had not declined and she was performing very well in school. Unfortunately, he was wrong. Courtney was later diagnosed at the age of 17 with inattentive type ADHD and major depressive disorder after she began struggling with keeping up with schoolwork, cutting herself, receiving outpatient therapy, and subsequent inpatient hospitalization treatment. There were many instances in which Courtney's struggles crippled her father and me with sadness for our daughter, followed by years of perpetual grief. The first instance I can recall was when Courtney began cutting herself. She was wearing shorts and her thighs had tinges of blood. I thought perhaps someone hurt my daughter before she proclaimed she had made the cuts herself. Cutting later transformed to tattoos. However, the cutting resumed as scarification when Courtney was incarcerated as an adult after missing a mental health court date when she had been reported missing to police, and at a time when she admitted to the jail treatment supervisor and a PASAR nurse that she was, in fact, a human trafficking victim. I digress. The ADHD medication seemed to be working well when Courtney was approximately 17, so she managed her own medical and mental health care for the next several years. She made her own appointments, worked, and independently drove herself wherever she needed to go. Courtney, like many young women, was interested in dating and had a few boyfriends over the years. One of our house rules was that she introduced anyone she dated to her father and me and provided us with their contact information. We met a few of her suitors when she was between the ages of 14 and 18. She had attended Notre Dame Cathedral Latin High School for 3 years with a scholarship and participated in the marching band before switching to the local public high school. She was hired at a fast food franchise, then graduated in 2010. Her art skills, shown here, had become so extraordinary that she was offered a scholarship to the Cleveland Institute of Art. Again, we were proud parents. Unfortunately, she started skipping classes and was in an abusive relationship, which resulted in police being called for a domestic violence incident. Because Courtney was 18, her father and I did not know this until the end of her college freshman year, when she failed her classes and moved her belongings back home from the dorm. She broke up with her boyfriend, transferred to Cuyahoga Community College, worked at the local mall, and seemed to be doing better with her coursework. Around June of 2012, Courtney started dating a man who was older than her. Her father and I found out several years later, while they were still dating, that he had encouraged her to be a cam girl. We also discovered that this included nudity and sexual acts when later viewing her social media accounts, including her social media messaging and cell phone text messaging. In addition to performing as an individual cam girl, she also created sexual videos with her boyfriend and worked at various strip clubs. This man continued a friendship with Courtney long after they broke up and encouraged her to send him nude photographs via social media messaging, despite the court deeming her incompetent by granting legal guardianship to her father and me. As stated before, we usually were not aware of these activities until long after they occurred once Courtney became an adult. We expressed our concerns and simultaneously always encouraged Courtney to utilize her skills to be productive throughout her life. It was my greatest honor to work alongside my daughter when she was a temporary employee at my former job collecting medical, Social Security, and IRS records for multi-district litigations. It was some time after her release that at the age of 23, Courtney had release from her job, that is. At the age of 23, Courtney had a manic episode that fulfilled her bipolar diagnosis. The mania was a direct result of her not taking her prescribed medication, not because she felt better, but because she thought she was being poisoned. We later found out that she was using illegal drugs with her boyfriend, which seemed to exacerbate the symptoms of her mental illness. When I confronted her about a noticeable change in her behavior, she responded that she worked for the CIA and was protecting our family. I suspected schizophrenia, but Courtney's father recommended we wait for the doctor's diagnosis. So we did. We were blindsided and relied heavily on information from healthcare providers from that point forward regarding how to proceed with follow-up treatment for several more years. The positive and negative symptoms developed over time in her early 20s, as is often the case with many mental illness diagnoses. Her diagnosis was then changed to schizoaffective bipolar. It was during this hospitalization around August 7, 2015, when Courtney met another man allegedly being treated for mental illness who began facilitating her trafficking. This seemingly chance encounter propelled the downward spiral for Courtney's final 6 years. As legal guardian, I requested and was granted a civil protection order on Courtney's behalf against this one trafficker, who often provided transportation for Courtney to exchange sex for drugs, but by then it was nearly impossible to prevent other traffickers and buyers from victimizing Courtney. Her father and I pled for many years to healthcare, mental health care, substance abuse treatment centers, law enforcement professionals, and even state agencies regarding the urgency of protecting Courtney. But no one listened or believed what was happening to our precious daughter until her trauma was so severe that she was unable to break the cycle. We never gave up and continually tried to help her, even when healthcare providers and others asked why we didn't just let her go. As with many disorders of the mind, it didn't matter what we called it. And there are sometimes multiple concurrent issues. With ADHD came depression for Courtney. With schizoaffective bipolar came substance abuse, human trafficking victimization, mental trauma, and medical issues. The difficulty was trying to figure out what to treat each time we went to the emergency department. Despite the claims for the availability of dual diagnosis programs, there is no availability anywhere that Courtney has ever been treated for comprehensive health care that fully treats medical, mental health, and/or substance use while simultaneously providing sexual assault examinations. Our fight continued throughout her treatment to seek this non-existent comprehensive care. As advocates, Courtney's father and I have educational backgrounds, family support, community resources, and financial resources that many do not. This is important because if we were unable to help our daughter using this vast array of resources, how is a victim without an advocate, without education, without financial means, without family, or without community support supposed to navigate the system to obtain trauma-informed care? My educational experience and background have allowed me to advocate in ways unknown to some. For example, I recently submitted proponent testimony. Some, but not all of the following timeline information was copied from my proponent testimony for Ohio House Bill 390, Sexual Assault Kits, that was submitted for the February 15, 2022 hearing. Here's where Courtney's ordinary story becomes more complex. As mentioned, Courtney met her trafficker in 2015, who remained in her life as a supposed friend during most of her relationships, hospitalizations, and treatments. She was reported missing to police several times since she met him in 2015 and was repeatedly victimized due to her vulnerabilities. It has been my experience that traffickers can easily access children and adults in person, via social media, and know what vulnerabilities to look for so they can exploit our loved ones before we can protect or recover them. It is important, but not foolproof, to monitor your children's social media and gaming accounts. Trust your instincts when meeting their friends. It matters. Around April 13th of 2016, Courtney left Ohio without warning by herself using my vehicle because she said she needed to get away. I had no idea at the time what or who she might need to get away from. She turned off her cell phone and did not call or text until she reached Nebraska. She told me she was going to California. Thankfully, we have family there who I was able to reach to ask to care for her between April 16th and April 25th of 2016. It was the best $1,000 trip I never took.
Hey, I wanted to break into this episode to let you know that if you're interested in getting ahead of the problem of human trafficking by engaging in prevention and changing the trajectory of the lives of at-risk youth, then listen and learn about what really works in the field of anti-trafficking prevention curricula. Follow me here. The first issue is to understand that every youth is not at the same level of risk. There are youth at higher risk than other youth. Second, for those at higher risk, education doesn't necessarily translate into lowered risk. Youth at high risk will be educated and will remain at high risk because there are other factors keeping them at high risk. Third, understand that sex traffickers don't commonly snatch youth off the street and chain their wrists and ankles. They manipulate them and chain their minds and hearts in what we call trauma bonding. If that's true, then we need to train youth to see the manipulation coming, assess it for what it is, and do something preemptively about it. My Best Life Human Trafficking Prevention curriculum for at-risk girls uses the SAFER method to teach girls how to see risky situations and risky people, assess the situation, find suitable and safe solutions, evaluate those solutions, and respond. We talk about support and relationships and boundaries, and we reduce the risk factors that increase the opportunities for someone to remain vulnerable and to be trafficked. If you're interested in lowering risk and perhaps changing the trajectory of someone's life for the better, check out my free webinar on the Best Life curriculum at celiawilliamson.com. Learn how to become a trained Best Life facilitator today. And now, on with the podcast.
Courtney only took $200 for gas money and food, slept in the car on her way there and on the way back, and had 3 flat tires because she didn't have toll money and went the wrong way on a rumble strip. I'm not certain how she missed that 4th tire. So, I wired money and arranged for tire replacements with the help of our family member and a reliable auto repair shop that I was lucky to find who graciously accepted a credit card payment by phone. These steps enabled Courtney to be safe in California and to return safely back to Ohio. She had no idea the work that went into keeping her safe during that adventure and every other escapade that her father and I helped her recover from for the next 5 years. On May 9th of 2016, Courtney's trafficker called to tell me she was staying at a hotel for some unknown reason and he thought she may have been robbed. Panicking, I called the local police department for a well check, and the requesting officer wrote in his report that she was fine and staying at the hotel for a while. Courtney started seeing another older man around that time, near June of 2016, who she referred to in her medical records and in her social media messaging as giving her Adderall and calling it candy. 2 months later, on July 14, 2016, she was admitted to the hospital's ICU with a left foot plantar blister, multiple burn sites, tachycardia, and a Glasgow coma scale total of 8. Our daughter was in a coma. She was transferred to Madison Healthcare Skilled Nursing and Rehabilitation on July 22, 2016, which had a locked psychiatric floor within the nursing home. Imagine your previously healthy 24-year-old adult child being admitted to a nursing home. She required inpatient physical therapy for back and leg nerve damage, wound care, and was still being prescribed the psychiatric medication she had overdosed on earlier that month. Each time we took Courtney to the emergency department, approved her admissions to psychiatric and other facilities, it often made Courtney angry while deeply hurting her father and me as we tried our best to get her proper care and treatment to protect her. I cried when we left the Madison nursing home after seeing the conditions in which my young daughter was subjected to as a result of her victimization, which had been unbeknownst to me at the time. Her father and I thought Courtney had a mental illness and substance use problem. We had no idea she was already being victimized by one or more of her supposed friends. Upon discharge, she was transferred to an inpatient psychiatric facility. For her medical records, her admission referred to the July 14, 2016 incident as follows. Quote, overdose on Zyprexa and suffered TBI, traumatic brain injury, nerve damage per 714 OD, drop foot, chronic pain problems, back, nerve, pain, legs. Unquote. She required wound care, physical therapy, was eventually prescribed another antipsychotic medication due to my advocacy, and suffered from nerve pain from that date forward. On August 5, 2016, Courtney's trafficker began texting me and told me he was picking her up. Our rule when Courtney was dating or going with friends was to provide contact information, so this was a welcome change. Little did I realize that Courtney's trafficker, who portrayed himself as her friend, had already been grooming my daughter for the past year and was also manipulating me, which continued for many years without my realizing until it was too late. Earlier that year, in a photograph caption dated April 5, 2016, he had written, sick, took care of you like I always do. I suspect she was dope sick, which I didn't understand until several years later. He often pretended to be her protector and called himself Superman. On October 10, 2017, Courtney was diagnosed with chronic PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. She was admitted to a state psychiatric hospital, which is no small feat to gain admission one time, much less several times, as we would learn. Again, we fought every step of the way, calling and emailing the crisis team, Adams board, mental health providers, and even social workers at the hospital. Courtney had genetic testing done at the state psychiatric hospital to provide guidance for the best medication combinations for her. This helped her father and I understand, as explained by her psychiatrist, that Courtney needed higher doses of pain medication to manage her pain because of her genetic disposition, which often led physicians to think she was drug-seeking when medications were not working. We also learned that too much of a certain medication was not as effective as a lower dose for treatment of a certain condition. By January 30th of 2018, we submitted a PASSR application for a higher level of care and were subsequently denied by the state of Ohio after the hearing. Courtney was placed on a waiting list for a Lake County group home while she was inpatient at the state psychiatric hospital. She was discharged from the hospital and admitted to the group home run by state psychiatric hospital staff on February 14th, 2018. She was so happy to be out of our home and on the road to being put on a waiting list for the county housing voucher program for her own apartment. We were happy for her too. Little did we know that 4 years after her elation of living at the group home for her and waiting for her own apartment, that we would be holding her funeral mass on Valentine's Day, one of her favorite holidays. It is important to include what previously worked to keep Courtney safe. She had a 30-day period with no cell phone and no visitors at the group home until March of 2018. She was permitted to use the house phone and could leave with one of her legal guardians. She did well until approximately May, when she was found to have alcohol. Courtney could either go to the local dual diagnosis psychiatric unit for admission or be discharged from the group home. So, we sought treatment for her. Getting a pink slip in Ohio seems nearly impossible at times. Treatment this time was only possible because of our requests as legal guardians to do so with the assistance of a social worker who knew how to help within the confines of Ohio law. Otherwise, Courtney would not have been able to receive treatment, as was sometimes the case when she was released without the proper treatment or too quickly before treatment could be effective. One major disadvantage was that Courtney's trafficker visited her during nearly every admission over the years, and at the group home. He was subsequently banned by the state psychiatric hospital group home staff after bringing her back impaired and being threatening to the staff. Courtney left the group home on June 17, 2018 around 8:30 p.m. Staff called me at 10:15 a.m. on Monday, June 18th, and she was then reported missing to police. Her trafficker texted me that he, quote, picked her up with a 50-year-old black guy at McDonald's, which was near 55th and St. Clair in Cleveland, Ohio. And she had this elaborate story about me meeting with these people and making us all money by basically pimping her out. I think I will become her pimp. End quote. He admitted to me that they get high together and that he gave her other drugs and herbs, including Vyvanse. He also stated she had needle marks in her foot. I thought, what kind of person texts, calls, and tells a mother these things? On June 19, 2018, as mother and legal guardian, I transported Courtney to a local hospital. I expressed my concerns to the emergency room doctor and social worker regarding her possibly being trafficked, although I did not know that verbiage at the time. She was accusing her friend and another man of selling her for drugs. I was told directly by the emergency department physician that Courtney had the right not to take her medicine, had the right not to perform daily activities to care for herself, had the right to use drugs, illegal drugs, and the right to prostitute herself, despite my suspicion that she had been drugged against her will or knowledge. I was present for the entire emergency room visit. No sexual assault examination or further evaluation was done that date, despite my pleas. Courtney was never granted the opportunity to have a sexual assault examination during that emergency department visit. It is important to note that this emergency department visit occurred after Courtney had been deemed incompetent in 2017 at our request through Lake County Probate Court in Ohio, as noted in the filed letters of guardianship dated May 23, 2017. Like a juvenile, because of her court-deemed incompetency, Courtney was unable to consent or to prostitute herself. She already had impaired thought processes from her mental illness diagnosis that were exacerbated by traffickers and buyers providing her with alcohol and/or administering drugs to her. It was heartbreaking to witness victim blaming through Courtney's victimization by providers and others who we sought for help. There were no resources at the time known to me to protect my daughter from further human trafficking victimization. The police, hospital staff, and even the group home staff repeatedly dismissed my claims, despite my desperately trying to get help for my daughter. I felt angry each time someone refused to listen regarding my daughter needing help and additional resources. This led to hiring a private investigator to substantiate my claims of Courtney being trafficked in exchange for drugs. This was an expensive endeavor, but it seemed my options were limited, and I needed to do something to help protect my daughter. A civil protection order was requested by me as legal guardian and granted in March of 2020 in the Court of Common Pleas, Lake County, Ohio, against Courtney's trafficker, who had befriended my daughter several years prior. I cried during my testimony as I told the magistrate of my daughter's victimization. Her trafficker not only stalked her in person, but also electronically through her social media applications. In person, he randomly showed up when Courtney's father and I took her to a local tattoo shop at her request for a piercing after we had been at a different shop that did not have what she wanted. She had forgotten her phone at home, and there was no way she could have called or texted him with where she had been going at the time. He also randomly showed up in a local shopping area at the same time I was pulling in, and at a hospital when Courtney's father and I were searching for her while she was missing. I later suspected that he may have used a tracking application of some sort, but I have no direct knowledge other than noting strange coincidences of his appearance in a few random locations, nowhere near where he lives or frequents. Courtney also provided information to me that he showed up at her boyfriend's house and was threatening if she refused to hang out with them. She also stated that he lied to see her during some of her inpatient admissions. Courtney's trafficker admitted to me that he befriended others she communicated with on her social media accounts, and he messaged them. One person he communicated with was the perpetrator who not only brought drugs to Courtney in an Ashtabula nursing home, but also brought drugs to the group home after her discharge from the nursing home. Courtney admittedly swallowed the drugs in the packet as indicated in her social media messages when police showed up to arrest him, the buyer, on an outstanding warrant. This was a direct result of the private investigator I hired providing police with information and forwarding screenshots of the expected transactions from social media messaging. Another man her trafficker messaged was a truck driver who admitted on another social media text application that he had spoken with her trafficker, shown here. He came to her house to meet Courtney's father, took her over the road in his truck without parental consent despite her incompetency for the guardianship order, and also texted Courtney on May 13, 2018, pursuant to legal guardianship being granted in 2017. Quote, "I should just be honest and say I acted like I was giving you money for sex," unquote. There have been numerous instances of grooming and victimization across several social media applications and multiple text messaging sources. Courtney told me just last year, in 2021, that she talked to strangers online because she would never have to worry about meeting them in person. She was wrong. On April 7th of 2019, there was a Lake Metro Parks report involving Courtney being nude from the waist down after she and her trafficker were at a strip club before going to the park. Those and other details have been intentionally blurred in the corresponding presentation slide. I was not aware of this incident until after Courtney went missing. On June 1st of 2019, Courtney was reported missing from a group home in Lake County, Ohio. The man who facilitated her trafficking, for which there was not yet a civil protection order petition or order, admitted to me that he had transported Courtney after she left the group home to his residence on June 1st. On June 4, 2019, I personally spoke with her trafficker, who claimed that Courtney fled from his residence that morning when he left her to go to the laundromat. I created a missing person flyer that the local police department posted on their social media website. I shared it on mine and created a missing person social media website. Almost immediately, friend requests started pouring in. I accepted. Then there were more and more. Since it was a new site, I was able to see how many friends we had in common, and noticed the only friends who were sending requests were all related somehow. That is the first time I suspected a problem with grooming on social media and reported it to the local FBI. I hired the same private investigating company to this time search for my daughter. I believed Courtney's disappearance was related to her being a victim of human trafficking, and I didn't know what else to do. Around the same time, Courtney's mental health case manager suggested I reach out to the Human Trafficking Task Force. The sergeant I spoke with was one of the first persons to ever believe me. It made all the difference in the world. I finally had a person to share information with who I hoped might be able to help stop the abuse of my daughter once we located her. We recovered Courtney when she reached out after several months to a previous boyfriend who she dated after obtaining nerve damage. He had treated her kindly during their courtship before her Ohio trafficker injected himself back into her life, and long before she went missing. Her former boyfriend assisted her father and me so we could hire an Uber driver to pick Courtney up from an exact location where she dropped a pin via her cell phone that she somehow acquired. This enabled us to safely bring her home from Detroit, Michigan on September 5, 2019. After her recovery, Courtney informed me that she attended the first Edgewater Live concert on June 6, 2019. She met a dentist at the Edgewater concert, but then stated they went there together and were both dressed up. She is pictured with him on one of her social media accounts while she was missing, for which geo-tracking or metadata was not available per the local police detective sergeant investigating Courtney's missing person case at the time. She was reportedly wearing black boots, but stated she couldn't remember the exact clothes they wore. This was later explained by Courtney to me in a follow-up conversation via telephone. The dentist gave her benzodiazepines to keep her calm, took her to a thrift store to buy clothes, and dropped her off at a women's shelter after she stayed with him for approximately 1 week and worked by cleaning his apartment when he went to his dental practice. She was then picked up at the women's shelter by a truck driver who was friends with the other truck driver from her other social media, and taken to Detroit, Michigan. Courtney stated that she lost her boots in Detroit due to being worn out from walking, so she bought new ones at a thrift store. I reached out to the clerk of courts, and it was confirmed that she and her husband had no court record of a marriage. Courtney stated that they had a dog and a roommate. Courtney was familiar with the Rosa Parks train station, was around people including a guitarist, worked as an apprentice for a tattoo artist, but also stated she worked from home and was not allowed to be home during the day because her husband wanted her to work. Her husband socialized by legal networking, according to Courtney. She first told me that she made $400 per month, then changed the amount to $4,500 in 3 months with a $50 quota per day that she gave to her husband. I was later told by Courtney that she was not permitted to return home to her apartment unless she made enough money each day. She stated she bought energy drinks and snacks at the gas station to sell to bar patrons, worked all night, and was a street performer. If she did not make her daily quota, she slept in alcoves and abandoned buildings. Her physical appearance was transformed, which made her unrecognizable upon her return to Ohio, as shown here. When she was recovered, she had cornrows in her hair and had lost a considerable amount of weight. She was only wearing a sweatshirt, shorts, and boots, no undergarments or shirt. She was incarcerated immediately upon her return as a result of a warrant from missing her mental health court date. I was devastated, yet relieved that my daughter was hopefully safe. No sexual assault examination was done to my knowledge, despite my disclosing that Courtney was a human trafficking victim, and despite my request as legal guardian for an opportunity to administer a sexual assault examination by a forensic nurse. Courtney later admitted to the PASAR nurse and jail treatment supervisor around January 2020 that she was, quote, a victim of human trafficking, and it was unfortunate, unquote. Courtney slept on the floor of her cell and refused to sleep on the bed. We received several PASAR denials, which eventually led to us hiring attorneys and a forensic psychologist in preparation of submitting an emergency PASAR. Despite our efforts, we never had the chance to do so because of the burdensome length of time it was taking to complete the process during the entire time Courtney was victimized from 2020 until 2022. Courtney was released on March 7, 2020 after serving 6 months in the Lake County Adult Detention Center. Although Courtney received her psychiatric medications from the same provider in jail as she had as an outpatient client, upon her release there were no step-down programs. She was not referred to a treatment center by the jail staff because they could not find a facility willing to admit Courtney for follow-up substance use treatment due to the severity of her mental illness. This had become and continued to be a recurring theme no matter where Courtney had been admitted to for dual diagnosis treatment, including but not limited to her incarceration. Additionally, she had been hospitalized so many times with at least 30 inpatient hospitalizations between 2008 and 2021 that she used her lifetime maximum Medicare bed days. To me, that's like telling someone with an ailment such as diabetes, I'm sorry, but you've maxed out your lifetime care. Mental illness should be recognized as a physical ailment, not separating ailments of the head from the body. Both physical and mental health disorders should be treated better with compassion, dignity, and the availability of services to those who so desperately need it. In this slide, you can see Courtney's transformation from before she went missing in May 2019 to a recovery from Detroit with cornrows in September of 2019. The results of her scarification while incarcerated, ending in March 2020, and later as a tattoo apprentice in November of 2020, while she was living at home with us. As mentioned above, a civil protection order was granted in March 2020 in the Court of Common Pleas, Lake County, Ohio. I filed the paperwork, hired a process server, and attended the hearings myself prior to hiring an attorney to represent me on Courtney's behalf as her legal guardian. Some victims, survivors, parents, or caregivers may not have the knowledge or means to do so. The administrative burden throughout Courtney's victimization was incredible, and I can't imagine not having the resources I had, even though they never seemed to be enough. I even hired a digital forensic investigator to review Courtney's known devices to find evidence of trafficking, but law enforcement agencies were not interested in the data. My subscription lapsed because it was cost prohibitive. The civil protection order provided protection for my daughter against the respondent who, as mentioned, Courtney met while inpatient at the same hospital located in Cuyahoga County several years before. The respondent was often present during emergency department visits in multiple Ohio counties, hospitalizations, and treatments, and it had a history of facilitating Courtney's prior human trafficking victimization. He also aided her in running away from the group home in June of 2019, at a time when she was without a vehicle, also noted earlier. Courtney's victimization was reported to several local law enforcement agencies, the Sheriff's Department, out-of-state law enforcement agencies, detectives bureaus, missing persons units, the National Human Trafficking Hotline, to the local FBI office, and to the local regional human trafficking task force after I realized what was happening to my daughter. I desperately tried to tell anyone who I thought could potentially help Courtney, in any way possible to end this horrific cycle of abuse. As a mother, it was devastating not to be believed, offered help, or offered resources to help my daughter. I can't imagine the pain a victim must feel, not understanding the complexity of the abuse, victim blaming, victimization being missed, ignored, not believed, misunderstood, or not addressed in a trauma-informed manner. Here is a photograph of Courtney when she was arrested in September of 2019. Instead of receiving help, she was punished. It makes me sad to say that jail was the only option to keep Courtney safe for a few months, away from her traffickers. Several of my colleagues can better tell you the difference between the needs of domestic violence survivors compared to human trafficking victims. But I can tell you that Courtney's needs after being in an abusive domestic violence relationship compared to her being victimized as a human trafficking victim were vastly different. The wait for a better shelter was too long. She had more difficulty following rules since her sleeping patterns were off. She required trauma-informed intake and treatment. Plus, she required more extensive case management services. On April 20th of 2020, Courtney was reported missing again to another local police department within Lake County, Ohio. She was cited by police at a truck stop in Brush, Colorado, cited in Santa Monica, California, then finally recovered by Allen Park, Michigan police. This was the only recovery that was successful with law enforcement assistance out of the numerous times that Courtney was reported missing to multiple police agencies, in part because her father called the chief furious that more wasn't being done when she was cited in Colorado, at which time the local police chief called the probate judge regarding how to proceed with the guardianship order. Courtney was recovered out of state by the Michigan Law Enforcement Agency, who cooperated with the local Ohio Law Enforcement Agency by detaining Courtney until her parents and legal guardians were able to transport her safely back to Ohio. So she had gone all the way to California and back to Michigan before she was recovered. Not only did the police chief find out how to proceed, he informed his entire department, who successfully relayed this information to the out-of-state law enforcement agency, at which time they were able to recover Courtney and hold her so we could provide the needed care for our daughter. One barrier for law enforcement is that victims are often groomed or fearful while victimized and or missing, which prohibits them from seeking medical treatment or needed services. Fortunately, this time law enforcement looked beneath the surface and coordinated efforts across state lines to successfully recover Courtney. On August 23, 2020, Courtney's father and I picked her up and transported her to a different hospital out of our home county in Cuyahoga County for a sexual assault examination. After years of horrific experiences for our daughter, we researched ourselves how to get additional help for her and located a hospital that was finally able to administer the sexual assault examination. Hospital police at the emergency department we transported her to in Ohio thought Courtney was there for pediatric treatment. My 28-year-old victimized daughter looked like she was a teenager, not an adult, shown here. I was present for the initial consultation when Courtney was asked and was willing to comply, at which time the sexual assault examination was completed after I left the emergency department room. It is my understanding that law enforcement was contacted by the hospital staff, and the sexual examination kit was picked up by the Human Trafficking Task Force. Unfortunately, the forensic nurse and emergency room doctor were unable to provide medical treatment for detoxification for mental health treatment. I was told to follow up with other providers and obtain community services because funds weren't available to provide such treatment. I will not name the facility, but can assure you that funds are available for this highly ranked hospital, but not being utilized to provide comprehensive treatment, perhaps for insurance, staffing, or other reasons. I was able to explain my disdain for the lack of comprehensive care to a managing nurse in a follow-up call several days after my daughter's discharge from this emergency department visit. The following day, since Courtney had not received additional medical, mental health, or substance use treatment, she suffered from the worst withdrawal I'd ever witnessed in my life, and hers. On August 24, 2020, we visited Courtney's primary physician and was referred to a different emergency department for an evaluation. She was admitted to a state psychiatric hospital. Upon discharge, she was referred to a treatment center in Florida by the state psychiatric hospital staff, who could not find a facility willing to admit Courtney due to the severity of her mental illness, a recurring theme. Let me reiterate, she was denied acceptance for admission by every dual diagnosis facility in Ohio and Pennsylvania that was contacted by the social worker at the state psychiatric hospital in Ohio. Upon discharge, she was admitted via bed-to-bed transfer on September 17, 2020, to a treatment center in Florida that was willing to admit Courtney despite the severity of her mental illness. Courtney returned to her family home since she had been discharged from the group home when she went missing and had again been placed on the waiting list while inpatient at the state psychiatric hospital prior to receiving treatment in Florida. Courtney got a legitimate job as a tattoo apprentice for the first time in several years and admitted that she would have left again if it hadn't been for her ability to work outside the home. Unfortunately, COVID caused the shop owner to return, and he did not need additional help, so Courtney was let go. On December 3, 2020, she went missing again. She called around December 28, 2020 to let us know that she was traveling in Minnesota with friends. Then on January 23, 2021, Courtney called from New Orleans, Louisiana, to state she was ready to come home and asked if her father and I could get her a bus ticket. So we did. This was the third time she had been missing since June 1st of 2019. She missed her connecting bus, so I called an 800 number to try to get a hotel room since she had no ID, no money, or credit card with her. They refused my request. So I called the front desk directly and received outstanding customer service from an individual who helped me provide shelter for my missing daughter overnight and provided a wake-up call so she could catch the next bus very early. We tried to avoid a hospitalization admission upon her return, but Courtney decompensated and was readmitted to the state psychiatric hospital again from January 29, 2021 until February 11th of 2021. There was yet another bed-to-bed transfer, again to Florida, for admission to the same treatment center from February 11, 2021 until March 3rd of 2021. She eloped overnight from two different facilities before being transferred to Port St. Lucie Hospital in Florida from March 23rd, 2021 until April 23rd of 2021, unfortunately on scholarship. Courtney had private medical insurance, Medicare, Medicaid in Ohio only, and was very fortunate to have several stays in the Ohio State Psychiatric Hospital, which does not accept insurance, and she had to be admitted to the Port St. Lucie Hospital in a similar manner, even though she was from Ohio. They graciously accepted her. Courtney and I both tried to find placement for her to be housed after her release from Port St. Lucie Hospital. She stayed at a group home in East Cleveland from April 23rd of 2021 until May 24th of 2021 because it was literally the only assisted living facility within 1 hour of our home county that had a bed available for placement. After a difficult month of suspected human trafficking victimization, Courtney was discharged before she was even approved for reduced income rent payments through the State of Ohio Residential State Supplement RSS program. These Florida stays required her father and me to travel to drop her off and pick her up to ensure her safe travels, especially since she sometimes couldn't manage her travel documents and IDs, or they were taken from her. On May 21st of 2021, there was a 911 call from Courtney to the East Cleveland Police Department because she stated that her boyfriend punched her in the head and stole her cell phone. There were no East Cleveland Police Department reports on file regarding this incident per the officer I spoke with, even though the 911 call showed on our family's cell phone plan. After Courtney had been missing from the group home for 2 days, she was finally reported missing to me, at which time ECPD was called for a requested well check. On May 24th of 2021, Courtney was transported to yet another local hospital emergency department. As legal guardian, I requested a sexual assault examination again. However, no examination was performed due to Courtney's denial to do so. She admitted at the time she was afraid of community backlash from her traffickers. From May 25th until June 1st of 2021, Courtney was admitted to a different behavioral health unit that she had never tried before. On June 1st, she was transported for transitional living in Geauga County while awaiting acceptance at a Lake County group home with the same state psychiatric hospital staffing as before. Courtney preferred to sleep on a chair in the living room and would not sleep in her bed. This caused swelling in her lower extremities. On August 23rd of 2021, Courtney was discharged from the Transitional Living Center to the same group home she had gone missing from on June 1st of 2019. Courtney slept on the floor of the group home rather than sleeping in the provided bed. Her father and I visited her during every admission and transported her to every appointment, sometimes with the help of family or available transportation services. Finding appropriate shelter for Courtney had always been challenging due to the severity of her mental illness and complexity of her trauma. Now, she was on the list to get her own apartment. Her father and I began trying to figure out how we could help Courtney manage her activities of daily living, medications, and food requirements. After all, we had worked together for this long, problem solving, and feeling like it was always us against the world, knowing how to best help our daughter when no one else would or could. Her housing voucher for her own apartment finally came through after years of being on the HCV waiting list, but it was too late. Courtney went missing again on November 9th of 2021, the same day her housing voucher approval meeting took place. Although I appreciate the efforts of law enforcement, Courtney was reportedly cited by 3 different law enforcement personnel within 2 weeks of her death earlier this year. It is my understanding she was simply reported as being seen to the investigating agency out of county, not assisted, arrested, nor were legal guardians given the opportunity to recover her despite her incompetency and inability to care for herself. The urgency of guardianship was failed to be relayed by the local law enforcement agency to whom we reported our daughter missing. Courtney was not recovered by the citing law enforcement agency for any of those 3 times. If this had been done, as it had been done with the cooperation of an out-of-state law enforcement agency with a different local Ohio law enforcement agency, perhaps detaining Courtney until her parents and legal guardians were able to transport her safely, this could have saved her life. The inaction denied us as her legal guardians to safely recover her and obtain any needed medical, mental health, and substance use treatment. From the moment I found out Courtney had been spotted, I began driving in that area of Cleveland, as did one of the task force detectives. We checked for multiple days afterwards and for hours on Friday after the last sighting by the 3rd and final detective, who Courtney had asked for money. Clearly she needed help, but none of the law enforcement personnel who saw her provided her with the needed assistance, despite there being a diversion center designated for just that purpose. According to the police report, Courtney was found deceased in Cleveland, Ohio, in an abandoned apartment sitting upright on a couch in the bedroom with 3 males in another room on February 7th of 2022. She was 29 years old, and she died without the comfort of her family who always supported her during her life. I informed the medical examiner that my beloved daughter was a human trafficking victim and asked that a sexual assault examination be requested from the supervisor. It is my understanding that the sexual assault examination was completed post-mortem. Courtney's viewing and funeral were the week that I wrote the following proponent testimony in part. Quote, as Courtney's mother, I have been advocating for her care her entire life along with her father. There were multiple human trafficking occurrences in several Ohio counties and out of state. Courtney's history of human trafficking and elopement were documented in her annual Lake County Probate Court expert evaluations, as well as in her PASSAR interview statement from January 2020, while she was incarcerated for possession of drugs obtained through her coercion. She also reported sexual abuse by drug dealers, quote, they hold me at gunpoint, end quote, in her medical records. Additionally, there are several police reports from various jurisdictions in Ohio, Michigan, and Colorado. To the world, Courtney appeared to be high-functioning, hid symptoms, and denied psychiatric and substance use issues. Her physical age was 29 years old, with a mental capacity, emotional intelligence age of 13 years old per 2 treating psychiatrists. She had a documented history from the age of 17 of dual diagnosis psychiatric instability dozens of inpatient psychiatric admissions, non-medication compliance, which resulted in an injectable antipsychotic medication administration, polysubstance use, overdoses, and/or suicidal ideations, self-harm injuries that she referred to as scarification, frequent UTIs, STIs, multiple elopements, along with multiple sex trafficking occurrences across Ohio and across the country. Due to Courtney's history, including repeated victimizations, self-injurious behavior, and vulnerabilities from mental illness and addiction, it was critical to protect Courtney from herself and others from subsequent injuries and/or death. All attempts to adequately protect her were futile, despite multiple PASSR applications and recoveries after elopement. Courtney was unable to care for herself, unable to manage prescription compliance, unable to make good choices, and was at extreme risk. As her parents and legal guardians, we asked for Courtney to be provided with an opportunity to be healthy at her baseline, sober, well cared for, and safe, not continually victimized or at risk due to her lifelong struggles with mental illness, addiction, and the inability to properly care for herself without supervision. It is critical to protect human trafficking victims from perpetrators. As a survivor mother of a human trafficking victim whose victimization led to her death, it is important to me that human trafficking victims be empowered to recover, not continually victimized or at risk of further harm or death due to not processing sexual assault kits and prosecuting offenders. Legislation can make a difference for numerous survivors and victims like Courtney." End quote. Our family celebrated Valentine's Day this year by saying goodbye to our daughter, granddaughter, sister, niece, cousin, coworker, and friend. I spent the evening of my daughter's viewing and the morning of her memorial mass writing proponent testimony for Ohio House Bill 390 regarding the importance of testing sexual assault kits, specifically because my daughter was subjected to a forensic exam twice, once while living after her recovery from being victimized in Michigan, and once post-mortem. As I mentioned earlier, she was deemed incompetent by a court of law and could not consent, so testing these kits could provide critical information regarding her abuse. Not only has human trafficking robbed my daughter of her life, it has robbed her, me, and our entire family in unimaginable ways over the past several years. Several systems repeatedly failed my daughter. The silos must be broken for there to be coordinated efforts within each system and across systems so that healthcare, mental health care, law enforcement, firefighters, emergency medical services, legislators, legal, advocates, and community leaders all work together to help seemingly ordinary people receive trauma-informed comprehensive care to lead extraordinary lives. Human trafficking not only affects victims, it impacts family and friends who also need support. Imagine if this victim were your child, your grandchild, your sibling, your cousin, your partner, your friend, your colleague, your neighbor. Would you ignore the signs, or would you do more for them to have a better chance of receiving the proper treatment and care? We must do better. Be the voice for those who cannot speak for themselves. One life lost is one too many, especially when it is someone for whom you deeply care. See something, say something, do something. Victims' lives depend on it.
That was Carolyn Kinkoff. Wow, it's difficult to hear a mother's cry. My mother used to tell me children are on your knee for a few years, and then they're on your heart for the rest of your life. So think about the ones you love now, currently, unconditionally. How far would you go? Maybe to the ends of the earth? I can relate to that. Carolyn has been in this fight for several years. She founded the Lake County Collaborative to End Human Trafficking. Their mission is to lead, empower, connect our community to eradicate human trafficking. Their website is collab, COLLAB 2nht.org if you want to see what they're up to. If you're interested in having Carolyn present, her email address is c.kinkoph@csuohio.edu. Carolyn is not stopping anytime soon. She is currently pursuing her doctoral degree, and she is an active member of the Global Association of Human Trafficking Scholars. And I have a feeling that this is the beginning of a long and effective career. Until next time, the fight continues.
Let's not just do something, let's do the best thing. If you like this episode of Emancipation Nation, please subscribe and I'll send you the weekly podcast. Until then, the fight continues.